Save your progress. Actually, so the light bulb, the electrical light bulb, right? A lot of people say that it was Thomas Edison, an American, who's the first to create the light bulb. He actually adapted an earlier design, which was by Canadians. So Canadians actually played a big role in the initial creation of the electric light bulb, which was a huge step forward, right? Also, it was a Canadian who played a huge role in the creation of the first telephones, the first electric telephones. Do you know who that was? Alexander Graham Bell, like Bell Communications Company, right? That's where that is named off of.
That's the name,
What's that?
the name.
Huh. Well, actually, he was Scottish, but he moved to Canada and became Canadian. But with a lot of these inventions, there were like several people who were close to discovering it around the same time. So it's kind of up for dispute as to who actually invented them. And it's the case with the telephone as well, right? But a lot of this happened really over a rapid period of time in like the late 1800s, right? So just over 100 years ago. Anyways, I'll see you tomorrow.
Oh, it's really tomorrow.
What's that?
Okay. Well.
Yeah, I've got a meeting.
Oh, there's a student today.
Would you be willing to like do a little work at home since you're leaving early?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I can start with my journal.
Okay, yeah. So for assignment 21 for ENG, assignment 21, you just have to write what you're going to be using.
Now we're on the screen.
So essentially, just reading, and then you can actually start your reading journal, right? So yeah, that's one thing you can do. And for the reading journal, there's a few things you need to do, right? I mean, it's all laid out in the assignment 21. When it's something that you're going to be updating, try to update every day, right? So every day, try to read like a little bit more, and maybe do 30 minutes of reading. Yeah, you can look at 21, and it will give you instructions. But what you need to do is choose something that you're going to read. Or it can be like a bunch of different things, right? But the whole point is that you do about 30 minutes of reading every day, and you write down your action about reading it, right? So write down your thoughts, and make sure it's something you have not read before, right? I want it to be new to you, right? So stuff you have not read before, right?
We looked at the first chapter of the book, so.
Oh yeah.
I haven't read much about it.
Well, if you read the first chapter, that's fine. Just continue reading it, right? And try to make predictions, right? So when you start reading, try to think, okay, how is this going to end? Okay?
Oh, all right, you.
Could be back in either.
So you read the first chapter of what?
It's called Steve's mini story, part 1.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Just continue reading past part 1, right? Oh yeah, we can talk about this more tomorrow. But just take a look at 21 and start your reading journal, okay? All right, see ya.
It's Lyle. I can't have to look out just thing I'm connected for the session today. If everyone could just mute their microphones, that would be a wonderful thing. And then still waiting for Kevin to dial in from wherever he's dialing in from. Don't have Dear Lake Connect yet, and don't have Fort Severn either.
Hi, Ben. I think your microphone is on.
Nope.
Should be red to be muted.
Oh, sorry. So when it's not red, it means it's turned on?
That's right. Yeah. Maybe they should have
Oh,
a
okay.
green light. It's a little easier.
Yeah, I just assumed it was turned off. I'll turn it off. I'll turn it off right now. Can you see me all right? There's like something with the camera where it's like near or far or like I'm not
Yep,
sure what's
we
going
can
on.
see you. Where are you gonna?
Okay.
Are you gonna stand or are you gonna sit?
Oh, I'm gonna sit down.
I think I can see you're okay.
Hi guys, I think we'll get started in about 5 minutes. Destiny's going to be a little bit late, so we'll just get everybody a chance to get in and get set up, and then we'll get started.
Hyatt's, Lyle, Canton, Sioux Lookout, but all your sites connected except for Fort Tavern. Not sure what's going on there. Their equipment isn't powered on, and they missed another session today, so I'm not sure what's going on there.
Okay, why don't we start with just mentioning who's here at your site. I'm going to jot the names down so that Desta has all the names. So if one of you could start and then just go to the next site and just list who's here, please.
Kevin Dempsey here.
Sorry, you were cut off there.
Sorry, Kevin Dempsey here. Now my camera's off for some reason. There we go.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
For Deer Lake, I'm Brenton. I don't know if you can see us. That's Dylan. That's Kelly. That's Miles. Sarah's in the corner. Bella's right here. Joanna's right here. And Haley is right there. And Nikki just walked in. We're all here. And Stefan is also here. Everybody is here.
Okay, perfect.
In Bombertown, we have Jonathan Woolley.
Hey, Lauren.
Melissa?
John, Craig, and Melissa in Bombertown, okay.
Carly here from North Spirit Lake. Lindsay. Monica.
Jordan.
Caitlin.
Okay, I missed the last name there. Carly, Lindsay, Monica, and
Caitlin and Jordan.
Caitlin and Jordan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm here in Statue Lake. I'm Simon Kim, under assistant.
Okay, next.
Hello from QAWin. It's Ben Gallup, THS teacher. Desta should be joining me soon.
Thanks, Ben.
And I'm Namoya in Poplar Hill.
Okay. Did we miss anyone?
Stephanie's also joining us in Bombertown.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we'll get started. Again, tonight it's going to be a little bit of more listening than doing, which is not the way I like to do things, but if you have questions, just feel free to pop in and ask the questions. I've posted the PowerPoint on the Kobe Classroom site, so if you want to download it, if you're finding that it's blurred or it's easier to watch off your screen, off your own screen as opposed to the video conference, please feel free to do that. We're just going to go through the PowerPoint. There's a couple of videos to share with you, and then any questions that you have or thoughts or concerns or whatever that you want to discuss as we go through, please feel free to just insert them wherever. You don't have to wait till the end, and so it's nice if we can have a little bit of a conversation around some of these pieces. So the last time we were together, a couple weeks ago, we talked about instructional strategies, and so tonight we're moving into assessment and evaluation. So we're going to begin with the end in mind, and a lot of our planning has to do with where we want the kids to end up. So I've got a couple of learning goals for us for tonight. So I just thought that maybe if we could frame our learning around thinking about these key learning goals. So in case it's too small or for you to read, I'll just share them. So our learning goals for tonight are around real, deep, and lasting learning is a product of thinking and experience. Student learning needs ongoing opportunity, support, and encouragement. Knowing our students is critical to our success in planning for learning. Learning is a social endeavor and unfolds within that context. We're going to talk about the social piece a little bit tonight. Instructional methods and curriculum aren't enough to develop understanding. It needs the ongoing support of the environment, which means that assessment is also key. And planning is key. So assessment, instruction, and curriculum all play a role. So some of the things we need to consider before we even begin our planning. We need to consider our class profile. So who's in our class? What does our class look like? Do we have pods of kids that have similar needs and strengths? And then going a little bit deeper into our student profiles so that we can support each of our students. We need to also know where the learning is going. So where are we headed? Where do we need to start? Which means we have to have some kind of a baseline. And we also need to consider equity of outcomes. So how are we going to get there in a way that's equitable for all? And the Ministry of Education would say in Learning for All that we always start with the student. And so when we believe that it is our students who are the starting point for our unit and lesson planning, not the course content or the textbook, we try to live that belief by getting to know our students' learning needs and preferences and then responding to that knowledge through the opportunities we provide in our classrooms. And so this doesn't necessarily mean that we plan 30 different learning opportunities, but that we plan really good learning opportunities that will support all of the students in our classroom. So when we do start with the student, we know that all students learn best when the instruction, the resources, and the learning environment are well suited to their particular strengths, interests, needs, and stage of readiness. So how do we do that? So we plan and provide the kind of assessment and instruction that enables all students to learn best. So there's three elements to that. One is personalization. The next is precision, which we get to through our assessment. And the third is professional learning, which is critical to the process. And around professional learning, when we know what our students' needs are, that's what the learning is that we need to engage ourselves in order to support the student need. So our professional learning as educators comes from understanding what our students' needs are and then learning how to support that within the classroom. And caring classrooms provide a foundation for student emotional well-being, but also place strong emphasis on academic learning. These classrooms have high academic expectations, engaging work, and differentiated instruction and support. Classrooms that provide the right level of academic challenge offer a learning space where students can take risks safely and grow in confidence. Ensuring clear behavioral expectations makes classrooms predictable and sets the stage for reinforcing behavioral limits. Well-being is also enhanced when educators offer flexibility, particularly when students are struggling with emotional burdens. Finally, caring classrooms allow for appropriate recognition of student academic and social emotional progress. So where can we find information about our students? And we touched on this a bit last time about student profiles, and the little diagram that's there is from Learning for All. It's near the back of the Learning for All document, and it just kind of goes through how do you profile a student and where do you get the information. So as we discussed last time, you can go through their OSR if they have one, the IEP and any psychological or other testing that might go along with an IEP. The IEP looks really deeply at what the student needs. And it gives you a list, really, of a place to start with each of those kids, what their needs are, what their strengths are. So it's very helpful to use the IEP in planning for a student's learning experiences. You can go to past teachers, you can talk to other current teachers. If you have different teams of teachers, like a student success team or an in-school support team, they may have other pieces of information that can support you in trying to get to know your students and in order to profile what your students' needs are. Any attendance reports, any information from parents, guardians, agencies, education counselors, outside sources, any collaborative notes from the student, any interests, sparks, strengths, learning styles, needs, and wishes. I include wishes in there because sometimes, and especially now, it's highlighted quite a bit now with kids who are transgender. One of their wishes may be that they wish to be called a he as opposed to a she. That's really important to know in order to move learning ahead with a student, that they feel comfortable and that they belong in your classroom. So wishes are just as important as the others. And then anything you might find out about a student through your professional learning communities or PLCs. So equity doesn't mean treating all students in the same way, but rather responding to the individual needs of each student and providing the conditions and interventions needed to help him or her succeed. So when we are looking at the learning opportunities and the assessment that we provide in our classrooms, we need to have some checks and balances and try to ensure that we've ensured equity of outcome for all the students in our classes. So for example, one small thing is, and I talk about this quite regularly because it becomes a thorn in my side, that all subject areas are important. There are different reasons that we shine in different subject areas. Some of us love phys ed because we are athletic or we like to move. Some of us love the arts because that's the kind of creative outlet that we need and we love. Some of us love academics and thrive there. So we have to keep in mind that all subject areas are important and that kids need all of those subject areas for a variety of reasons, so that they can get to a particular career, so that they can shine and feel good in different areas for well-being, etc. Our curriculum areas or our subject areas also provide the skills that we need for life. So things like citizenship, literacy, numeracy, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity and innovation, resiliency, coping, and also how to fail, so that failing produces learning and innovation, rather than failing creating people who shut down. So equity is a really big thing, and we need to just kind of have those checks and balances in the backs of our minds when we're creating the learning opportunities. So inclusive design speaks to us about how can we ensure that the programming that we provide is authentic and reflects the lived experiences and abilities of our students. How do our classrooms and schools honor the voices and lived realities of parents and community members in the local and global contexts? So how do we engage our parents? What does the environment of our classroom and school say about how we value our learners, our communities, and the process of learning? Are we always focused on the grade, or do we take kids through that process of learning? How well do we know who our students are and how they are experiencing school? Do we know their patterns of success? Do we know who and where our students are being underserved? How do we ensure that we've included all of our students? And how are we planning in our classrooms and schools in a way that builds the collective capacity and leadership of our students, staff, and community? How do we draw on the voices and realities of our students to make responsive programming decisions? So we try and do that through inclusive design, which means that we're purposely designing our instruction. We're engaging parents, families, and community. We're using the environment as our third teacher. We analyze any kinds of data that we have so that we're supporting all students in our classrooms. We're building leadership capacity within our students, and we're engaging student voice. So when we think about teaching and learning, especially in the 21st century, we have to ensure that we include assessment, curriculum, and instruction. Excuse me. The assessment piece is about where we are headed, how well we've understood or learned the concept or curriculum. What are we learning? Instruction is about how are we learning. This can also be measured through the learning skills and work habits. And we're going to go into the learning skills a little bit more. So where's the learner starting? Where's the learner going? That's our assessment. Curriculum and instruction is about how are we getting there? What are we learning? How are we getting there? So I've also uploaded a copy of Growing Success, which I had uploaded last time as well. But Growing Success will tell you that the primary purpose of assessment and evaluation is to improve student learning. So it's not just for a grade on a report card. It really is about moving the student learning forward. And sometimes we lose that for the sake of the accountability piece 2 or 3 times a year. So it's really important to keep this in mind. And as we go through and talk about assessment for us and of learning, this should come to light a little bit more. So there are 7 fundamental principles. And if you want to open your Growing Success book, I believe these are on page 6 or page 7 of the Growing Success Manual. And I'm not going to read these to you, but I would like you to read through them yourself and pick one that resonates with you, and just take a couple of minutes to discuss within your group, if you can, if you have somebody there to discuss with, why that resonates with you, and then we'll just share back with the group which one resonated with you. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. to each group. So which one or which points resonated with you the most? And why did they stand out for you? Does anyone want to just volunteer, or do you want me to go through?
We'll volunteer.
Okay, go ahead.
So we thought this together, we thought they were all very relevant, but the second one most of all, the second point, just simply because in our school, in our classrooms, we meet both, like we have to support students with special education, students who are learning the language, so English, and as well those students who are First Nation, which are all of them.
So do the majority of your students speak Ojibwe, Ojibwe?
It's more of just there's a kind of a way of talking English that's not necessarily proper, and it translates into their grammar and their spelling, and that's something that has to be accounted for when you're writing, right? Because if they're saying a word when they speak one way, they're trying to spell it that way, and that's not necessarily the way it's spelled or the way that it's grammatically correct.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Is there another group that would like to share?
Okay.
Bombertown.
Here in Central Lake, me and my assistant, we were talking about how assessment in the native languages are important in here. Personally, myself, from my own experience, which one was it? The communication to the students of the outcomes that we're covering in each activity that we're doing needs to be communicated very clearly so that the students know from the beginning what they're learning and what they're going to be assessed on. When the students don't know what they're being assessed on, then that's when there's confusion and a lack. We should minimize confusion when we can.
Hi, we're here in Balmertown. And I think what resonated with us was especially the first one, because it seemed to encompass the spirit of all of the other fundamental principles. It goes back to what you mentioned earlier about equality not being sameness. So, I mean, if you look at the second one, they're talking about special education students, ESL students, and others who may need us to instruct them differently.
Thank you. Any other group?
I'll jump in here. What jumped out at me was the third one. Maybe because we're, as a high school, we're always looking at curriculum expectations as we deliver our courses, and trying to figure out ways that the lessons can reach the students with different interests and learning styles and preferences and needs and experiences. So that one spoke to me.
Perfect, and you know that you're only responsible for reporting on the overall expectations, which means that then you have some leeway in what the specific expectations are that you use to get towards those overall, which help when you need some variety.
Yeah, definitely. We were pleased to uncover that nugget from growing success.
Yes, and it certainly helps when you're doing your report cards to keep that in mind, that it's the overall expectations, not the specific expectations that you need to report on, because then you can write a report that is more flowing rather than, and this specifically is more for elementary teachers. When you get into those specific expectations all the time, it tends to become like a shopping list of skills that you're checking off for a report card. Whereas when you start thinking about overall, what are those big things that you're taking the kids through, then you can report a little bit. It's easier to report than on the learning in the language block or the learning in the math block, that kind of thing. So that's a critical one. That one stands out for me most times too when I read through these. Any other group that would like to share?
I'll go now if that's all right.
Or not? Okay, we'll go. The one about self-assessment skills resonated with us. Just thinking about what that really teaches the kids about what we're looking for and what they should be looking for in themselves. And I think the skill of being self-reflective in life in general is really valuable. So to teach them that and setting those goals for themselves as young as possible is really valuable to them in and out of school.
And just to tag on to that too, that one really links into the self-regulation learning skill. And I know lots of times we get hung up on self-regulation being about a student's behavior, but really when you look through Growing Success and look at the learning skill and what it's all about, it is all about setting those goals, self-monitoring those goals, reassessing and resetting your next, or planning your next steps. So, and that learning skill is there from grade 1 right through to grade 12. So that's a key one. Thanks for sharing that. Next.
If it's okay, I'll go now. So I agree with what was said earlier about the second point, because I think all three apply to our situation up north, and some of them kind of overlap. For instance, I have students who have IEPs who are also, even though English is their first and main language, they still have a lot of difficulties with it, and they're still lack some of the basic language skills. So I think those are really important up here. And I also think that the communication with parents and students is really, really important. And it's something that we have to take a little bit more initiative in because it's a different environment than down south. And I've noticed that as I've talked more with parents and students about their trajectory and their progress, it's really been beneficial in general. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, that ongoing communication is really, really key. And it is something that you can let slide over time if things seem to be going well. But when I work with new teachers, I always say, the more you keep your parents in the loop, and whether it's good, bad, or ugly, the more they're likely to be on your side or be more supportive of what's going on. If it's not when it falls apart, or when the kid falls apart, if it's not a surprise and you've kept them in the loop all the way along, it's more easy to manage as a parent to understand that and to be able to handle that and to support the teacher in the classroom, as opposed to not hearing anything and then all of a sudden, whammo, this is what's going on. I've had one of those moments as a parent, and it's really not a good feeling when you're surprised. So ongoing communication is always really, really critical. Don't think we hit everyone yet. Was there anyone else who wanted to share? Okay, maybe we did get to everyone. I'm sorry, I apologize. So we'll go forward. So the learning skills. So the learning skills are really very critical. And oftentimes, I know the teachers that I work with regularly, oftentimes it's just simply at report card time, it's like that gut feeling of, I think this is a this, an excellent, a good, a satisfactory, it needs improvement, whatever. There's not really a whole lot of evidence collected in terms of the learning skills, but the learning skills really are very important. And this is really how we learn and where it comes from. If you read through Growing Success, there's about 3 or 4 pages just alone, all focused on the learning skills. And the learning skills are the entire first page of the elementary report card. And they are assessed for every single grade that the secondary student is in. So each course that they're in, every teacher has to report on the learning skills. They're consistent from grades 1 through 12. They're meant to be developed and strengthened through the years. And where they come from, which some people don't know, is that they came through research with the Ministry of Education, with Human Resources and Skills Development Canada, the Conference Board of Canada, the Ontario Skills Passport, which is part of our co-op, and the Habits of Mind. And these are the things that employers said, we want kids coming out of school to be able to do independently so that they will be more successful in life as a citizen and as an employee. So they really, really are very important. And sometimes when we're looking at the learning skills, we may not ever suggest to a student how they might improve on their learning skills or their organization or their responsibility or their self-regulation or any of those things. We might just put it on the report card and not think about it again. But your comment to them about how they could improve on some of those areas could be the one key thing that helps them later in life. And lots of times I know I've worked in both elementary and secondary panels, and I know that the secondary mindset often is, well, they should be coming with these, they should be coming with these, but the reality is they're not. They're not there yet, and lots of these don't get fully developed until kids are in their 20s. So I have the quote there from Growing Success. It's expected that teachers will work with students to ensure that they understand the learning skills and work habits and how important they are. So this comes from Learning for All. We talk about assessment for as and of learning within the context of Growing Success, but I really like how Learning for All pulls it apart. So I've included this little slide that talks about the 3 different types of assessment. And so assessment, I'm going to start with assessment of learning because it is the one, this is where we get our grades from, and this is the snapshot in time that we put on the report card. So it doesn't include every little itty-bitty thing that the kid has done, but what it is summative, it's a summative type snapshot. It confirms what the students know and can do. It's used to demonstrate whether the student has achieved the curriculum outcomes. This is where the teacher gathers appropriate evidence through a variety of sources, observations, conversations, and products, in order to provide a reliable and accurate evaluation or statement about the student's proficiency. So this is where you use your evidence, and it's select pieces of evidence and your professional judgment in order to put forth a grade for a student so that other stakeholders can use that information to make reasonable decisions about the student moving forward. So are they able to go to the next grade? Do they require an IEP? Are they going to graduate? All those kinds of things. That's your assessment of learning. That's the big one, and that's the one we tend to focus a lot on. However, the other 2, assessment for learning and assessment as learning, are equally critically important because these 2 are about moving student learning forward. So in a sense, they're similar in that they move learning forward, but assessment for learning is about the teacher. So the teacher is taking actions based on something that has happened in the classroom in order to help move the learning forward, whereas assessment as learning is about the actions the student takes. So this might be my self-assessment. I'm here, I need to set this goal, I need to do these couple extra things, and then my learning moves forward. Or it could be peer assessment. But these are things that help and are critical to moving the learning forward, but they're not key pieces of evidence that you would put into calculating a grade for the report card. These are pieces of evidence that you would use to inform your professional judgment. So if you were looking at your assessment of learning, but you looked and went, oh my, like the students started at a 50% and they've really come a long way. They're now at a 60%. They've grown 10% over the semester or whatever. Will probably take that into consideration in your grade. So if their calculated grade in assessment of learning has come across as 52%, you might say, but they've moved 10% from where they started, so I'm going to bump them up to a 55%. So that's justifiable, and that's what we have. There's no correct grades, it's justifiable grades, and we want to use our professional judgment because that is what is most fair for kids. Doesn't mean that everybody gets painted with the same brush, whereas a calculation is that everybody gets painted with. So there's some flexibility there when you're using your professional judgment. Are there any questions about this particular slide before I move on? Okay, so where do we begin? So when we're using our profiles, and that's our student and our class profiles, and our knowledge of our curriculum overall expectations, what are our big ideas for learning? So where do we want the kids to go? What do we want them to know and be able to do by the time they leave the class, either so that they can be successful in the next class, so that they can be successful in life, so that they can make some kind of change, social change. We want to ensure that we're addressing authentic questions so that there is a link bigger and outside of school, the school day-to-day life, so that they have some sense that there's purpose to what they're doing, that it has an intrinsic value. So it's not just we're doing this work for the sake of doing the work or because my teacher asked me to, that there is something here that has meaning to it. So it could be through social justice, could be through cultural relevance or cultural competency, it could be to engage or bump up the learning, and the other thing that it should do is provide for multiple entry points so that all students can participate in the learning. So our planning should take the most time in order to ensure that assessment, practice, and learning progress is most efficient and effective. So when we're planning our lessons, how are we going to embed those opportunities for understanding where our kids are at? So what kinds of formative assessment are we going to give? What kinds of diagnostics are we going to give? How are we going to use those? Are we just going to do them for the sake of doing them, or are we going to actually use the information that we get from that so that we can take this little group of kids who need this little bit extra, or this group of kids who really get it, and do the next thing with them and move them further forward? So when you're considering your planning, consider that tiered approach, and this diagram comes straight out of Learning for All, and it really talks about your tier 1 is applying those principles, and we talked about them last time about universal design and differentiated instruction to support the biggest bulk of the students in your class. And then your tier 2 are the kids who need a little bit more intervention, need to be monitored a little bit more closely, might need 1 or 2 different little tweaks in order to be able to move the learning forward there. And then the tier 3 is around the kids who may need extra supports to come in from outside of your classroom or your school. And then how are you going to use your environment to support the learning? What kinds of things do you have on the wall? How do you have your desks positioned? How do you hold yourself? Do you sit at your desk, or do you rotate through the classroom? Do you have a small group instruction area? Planning effective questioning is very, very critical. And how will you use assessment for and as learning to move the learning forward? Your feedback for learning, how will you use assessment of learning, and how will you elicit student voice? So that's a lot of things to consider, but it's definitely doable. So I have a little video here for you. This is one of my favorite guys, Dylan William. He does a lot of stuff on formative learning, formative assessment, feedback for learning, etc.
To me, formative assessment describes all those processes by which teachers and learners use information about student achievement to make adjustments to the student's learning that improve their achievement. So it's about using the information to adapt your teaching and adapt the work of the students to put the learning back on track, if you like, to make sure that the learning is proceeding in the right direction and to support that learning. So it's what happens when you don't just lecture students and rattle through the material until you get to the end and ask them if they've understood it okay. It's constantly making those adjustments. One of the ways I like to talk about it is just imagine what would happen if a pilot flew like many teachers assess. So I flew back from Seattle a few weeks ago. Just imagine what the pilot would have done. He would have flown east for 9 hours, and then after 9 hours he says it's time to land. So he'll put the plane down and he'll ask, is this London? And of course, even if it's not London, he says, well, everybody's got to get off because I've got to get onto the next journey. And that's exactly the way that we've assessed in the past. We teach students material, and at the end of that teaching, we find out if they learned it or not. And if they haven't, we say, too bad, because we're on to the next unit. So what formative assessment does is encourages teachers to take constant readings about where students are, just in the same way that a pilot takes constant readings about their position. And if the learning isn't proceeding as you'd planned, then you make adjustments. That's the essence, to me, of formative assessment. So the reason I think that formative assessment is the right focus is because assessment is the bridge between teaching and learning. It's only through assessment of some kind that you know whether what has been taught has been learned. And that's why I think this focus on this assessment process, minute by minute and day by day, not at the end of a sequence of learning, minute and day by day, allows teachers to reflect on their practice and make small steps in improving that practice in a more powerful way than anything we've seen before.
So are there any comments on that, on what he had to say there? Any thoughts?
Is it always a conscious process when the teacher is making adjustments in response to assessment for learning? Is all assessment for learning done consciously?
Well, anyone else could feel free to jump in if they would like. I think in order to move the learning forward, it does have to be conscious, because otherwise you're just kind of going through the motions, I think. So if you want it to be precise and personal to the child in order to move them forward or give them that exact next step or give them the opportunity for that next step, that it does have to be a pretty conscious thing. Does that make sense? I think there are lots of different ways of documenting that learning. Like we do spend quite a bit of time talking about pedagogical documentation and how do you document that learning. So I think we have this emphasis on accountability and transparency and showing parents that, we've had this conversation or the child has done this or done that. But I think that there are lots of different ways of documenting how you know whether a child has learned or moved forward. And you can use different things like checklists. I have teachers who use file folders and have them laminated with different checklists and things on them where they document little anecdotal notes pretty quickly through the day. Doesn't necessarily mean that every kid gets one-to-one every single day in that particular area, but they are seen a few times a week. So that in a small group setting, so that they can move that learning forward and they can keep track and make sure that nobody gets lost in the shuffle. Any other thoughts or comments?
Sorry, we just briefly lost our stream here, but I wanted to comment on what you said earlier about it being a conscious decision. I think as good professionals and as good teachers, we do that, we might start off doing it consciously, but it becomes sort of organic to our practice over the years, where we see a child who needs help or maybe just isn't getting the concept or isn't moving forward, and we just, we've come to know the child, their interests and things like that, so we just start offering those suggestions and scaffolding and guiding them towards that sort of metacognitive learning.
Your example of using metacognition, though, indicates that it's conscious as opposed to subconscious. But I do think, with experience and time, it does become a more innate thing that you do with kids. But it doesn't come natural to everybody right away. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, I'm going to move on because I have another little video for you here shortly too. So when we are planning, we need to plan effective questioning to grab their attention. And there's all kinds of different questioning techniques out there so that you can ask open-ended questions, ask higher order questions. There's focused conversations, which I think we talked about a little bit last time around the ORID structure, where you ask a different series of questions to take the learning deeper. Making sure that giving feedback that moves the learners forward is really critical. So Dylan Williams will talk about giving feedback that's effective and feedback that's not effective, like telling a child that they are good is not necessarily helping to move the learning forward, but giving very specific feedback about the work that they have done will help to move the learning forward. And he's got all kinds of little videos and stuff. You just have to Google him, and he's got like little 3-minute videos on all kinds of things around assessment and feedback. Student-centered learning that's led by teachers, done with students to engage them in their own learning, helps to activate students as learning resources for themselves and for others. So that's critical as well. And then I have a little video clip here on that. So Ron Richard, this is the next video. He he has the book Making Thinking Visible. So he's all about creating those learning opportunities where kids can show their thinking. And so this is just over an hour long, so I've just picked a little snippet of it, but what he's done in this, oh, sorry, I haven't shut down. What he's done in this little video is he has taken the group through an example where he puts a historical picture up on the board like he's got there, and he just takes a tiny little piece of it and shows a little piece of it and asks them, what do you notice? What do you wonder? How does this make you feel? And so everybody can talk about what they notice, what they wonder, what they feel about that little piece of the picture. And then he adds another little piece and another little piece and takes them through the same series of questions and eventually unravels a whole piece, which is, in this case, was a piece that was in the Smithsonian, I believe. Anyway, then they get into the history of the piece and start talking about that. So it's quite an interesting way to get the kids all sort of thinking and wondering and why do you think there's this in the picture and what do you think's happening there and why do you think that the significance of this picture is? And so they get right into it and he sort of unravels it, but then he's going now into creating those questions that kids need. So I'm just going to let it play for a few minutes here.
You've got a very different posture, turned away from the group, so lots of questions potentially thinking about there. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is the importance of questions. As we create those powerful opportunities, Zoom In was built on questions, and that's a very key part about asking the right questions, so thinking about what kinds of questions do I want to ask. Within the classroom, as we design activities, as we design things, and we're really creating those opportunities, what really makes those opportunities come alive are the questions that we ask of students and the way that we engage students through questions. And this has been an area of my research for the past couple of years. So I want to share with you briefly what we've been finding about teacher questions, and also you'll see some connection back to the Zoom In within that. So in looking at classrooms, there are lots of people who have looked at questions. There are many different ways you might parse them. We came up with 5 categories of questions that we notice teachers asking. And one is teachers ask review questions. So this is reviewing terminology, content, facts, skills, who can tell me what we did yesterday. You're reviewing those kinds of things within that. Another set of questions that teachers ask are procedural questions, and these have to do with the work. By definition, by our definition as researchers, procedural questions don't have anything to do with the content. They are questions like, does everybody have their pencil? Is everybody ready to go? It's not about the content, it's about the management of the class. Getting away with that. Procedural questions for that. Is everybody with me? Can we go on? All about those kinds of things. The third set, generative questions. And generative questions fell into 2 types. They could either be essential questions, those big questions which kind of drive a sense of inquiry about what is it that drove explorers to settle the West. So could be those big essential questions which drive an entire unit, or another kind of generative question are authentic questions. And these are questions about the content to which the teacher doesn't already know the answer. They're the single rarest questions that are asked in classroom. They represent generally less than 1% of teachers' questions, authentic questions within that. And the reason for that is, well, it's very hard to ask questions about content that you don't already know because you're teaching the content. And yet, what other researchers, Martin Nystrom has found, is that more than any other type of question, when a teacher asks an authentic question, it bumps up the learning. in a class. And the reason for that is that when a teacher asks an authentic question, the teacher is signaling their own curiosity about the topic. All of a sudden the teacher says, hey, I never thought about that. I wonder if that's true. All of a sudden everyone in the class realizes, oh, the teacher doesn't even know that. Oh, we've stumbled on something new, and everyone becomes engaged, and so it bumps up learning within that. Fourth type there, constructive questions. So these are the questions that are about building understanding. And so in the Zoom in, we were really looking at those kinds of questions that would help to build understanding. So asking constructive questions, that idea of interpreting, connecting, linking, really building understanding there. And the last set are what are called facilitative questions. And these are about uncovering the learner's thinking. So that question, you saw it pop up several times on the slides, and you heard me asking it, what makes you say that? That's a facilitative question. Getting the student to begin to reveal their thinking, the evidence, their reasoning behind those. So these 5 set of questions, we've looked at classrooms and looked at how these play out in classrooms within that. In the Zoom-ins, they're pretty much focused on asking constructive questions and facilitative questions of moving that forward within that. Just to give you a very brief snapshot of what this looks like is we looked at classrooms. The standards-based classrooms were classrooms where teachers were told and instructed, evaluated on teaching for the test. Basically, these classrooms look like test prep. We know what the test is. It's about getting kids to pass the test. It's about doing that. Those, some people might call those traditional classrooms. Some people are calling them standards-based classrooms within that. And then classrooms that teachers were working with in which they were focused on the thinking. And here's briefly what it looks like. And what we see is, we do see this difference in terms of review questions that are being asked there. So in the thinking classrooms, teachers ask, these are percentages, they ask fewer review questions. They also ask fewer procedural questions. But the big difference comes in they really ask many more facilitative questions. It's about pushing students to think, and it's about making sure that they reveal their thinking and their ideas. And just like Fred Newman's work showing that powerful learning opportunities, authentic intellectual activity actually prepared kids better for tested basic skills, what our research has shown is that when students are thinking and they're engaged in thinking about basic classrooms, when they're engaged in actually expressing their thinking, students' performance on tests also does better, because this is really about consolidating understanding, learning to communicate, and that has a really high transfer rate to students in terms of their test. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll turn it over to some questions.
So just in your little group, think about what he just shared about types of questions. Think about what types of questions you generally ask the most of your students. Just talk about amongst yourselves about one thing that you might try to change or one thing that you might try to do more of if you're already doing some of these things. I'll give you 3 to 5 minutes. have a little share. I just want to say welcome, Desta. I saw you sneak in there. Maybe you guys want to start.
Okay. Hello, everyone. From Kiwewan here. Ben and I are enjoying the session so far. Thank you, Tracy. We were just talking a bit about some of the uniqueness of KIHS and how Ben has been able to work through effective questioning to try to engage students in his classroom. And one thing we came up with was that there has to be some preliminary work that gets you to this stage of effective questioning based on relationship building and students trusting not only each other, but trusting the teacher as part of the co-learner in the whole process.
Yeah, also I'd say that for us, authentic questioning is probably a little bit more higher than average because the way our school is set up is that each teacher is basically teaching all subjects to an extent. So, for example, I'm not a science teacher, but when I'm teaching science, I might say to my student, I don't know, let's find this out together, right? So that is my understanding. It sounds more like an authentic question. And we were talking about how that is a good model for students, that they can see someone who isn't an expert, who's able to say, regardless, like, let's work through this, let's try and figure this out. So it models good problem-solving abilities and stuff like that. So I think that was pretty much, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks. Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Do you want to name who goes next?
Oh.
Deer Lake.
Pass it on.
Hi there. We talked about the importance of having higher order thinking questions. Obviously those knowledge and understanding questions are important, but we want to give our students opportunities to answer application questions as well. Sarah had the great idea of incorporating opinion questions to give them a chance to argue their answer. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Deer Lake. I actually have like a little questioning grid that matches higher order thinking questions to the thinking category, or the categories, the achievement chart categories, as well as to the skills on the OSSLT. So if any of you are interested in that, just send me a little note and I'll forward it to you. And do you want to name, Deer Lake, do you want to name who will go next, please?
North Spirit.
Hi everybody, it's Adrian from North Spirit. We were having a conversation about the importance of planning, and when you're planning and you design your lessons, you really want to ensure that the students participate in the most effective way possible. So we were talking about planning to include effective questions or effective question strategies in your lesson planning. This ensures that we don't ask questions that are too vague, so we don't ask questions that students are unsure of or unsure of what's being asked of them. This would then effectively help them participate in the lessons and draw the most amount from the lessons. So really what we're talking about is creating question strategies that ask divergent questions, questions that have multiple possibilities or multiple answers, and that encourage students to be creative, to express themselves insightfully, and also are conducive to students working in groups, so you have a range of opinions coming out from your questions.
That's awesome, thank you. Can you name who to go next, please?
Fort Severn? Sorry, no Fort Severn, Barberton?
Sorry, Fort Severn, we can't hear you if you're talking.
I don't think Fort Severn is connected.
Okay. Any volunteers to go next?
We'll go next. Oh, sorry.
There we go.
No? Okay. So we actually strayed in our conversation, and we started talking because Lauren and I are both at KHS about the categories of knowledge and skills, or I think that's what you meant when you were referring to the achievement chart. That's at the beginning of each of the curriculum booklets. And we're just thinking about how when you break it down into those categories and the percentage of each category that you're supposed to include in your lesson, how that also helps guide you into those same sort of questions that you were talking about. And I guess we were just sort of wondering is, how would you put the two together?
So I like to look at the verbs of the expectations and look at what the kids need to be doing, what they should be knowing and understanding and what they should be doing, and then link that back to the categories so that I'm not a huge proponent of giving each of the categories a specific percentage because some curriculum areas, some curriculum documents and subjects lend themselves more to one particular area over another, but I like to focus a lot on ensuring that there's a lot of thinking going on in the classroom and a lot of application, but of course you need to have some knowledge and communication. Because it's a 21C skill, I really like to ensure that there's communication throughout. So I have a really hard time pinpointing things to the curriculum or to the 4 categories to a specific percentage and say that my course is going to be broken down 25, 25, 25, 25 by those categories. I like to ensure that there's a high degree of thinking and application and that there's communication throughout, and whatever knowledge needs to be there to support is going to be there. I prefer to focus my energies and my efforts on assessment for as and of learning so that I can ensure that it's about moving the learning forward, that we're moving forward through whatever questioning or whatever assessments we're doing or whatever tasks we're doing, that's moving forward as opposed to pinpointing it to a specific category, because what inevitably ends up happening is we get caught in that minutia of how much is this worth and how much is this worth, and then we're stuck in that cycle of grades, grades, grades as opposed to learning. So I don't know if that fits. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, but like, are we not required by the ministry to follow that? And I know you can never get it, like in history, it breaks down to 19% knowledge, 21% for all the other categories, but aren't we required by the ministry to follow that? And I know it'll never be perfect completely, but...
So have you ever seen those percentages in a curriculum document?
Well, yeah, like right here. like it'll give you like 2 indicators and then 3, 3, and 3. So when you break it down, it's 19, 21, 21, and 21.
But they don't actually put the percentages in there.
We've always, at KIHS, we've always used that as a guideline for our teachers and in terms of how they're breaking down their assessment. So I think that's where Melissa's getting the precise percentages from, but yeah, it's somewhat arbitrary given that there's, you know, 2 descriptors or 3 descriptors. It's difficult to hold fast to those percentages, and there's obviously a certain amount of overlap between the categories depending on what the task is or the questions are in a given assignment.
No, I agree with that. So I'm just being trying to provoke some thinking. That's all. In that some of those indicators would be heavier or bigger, or you would spend more time on them within a certain course as opposed to some of the other ones. So it's all about really looking at what's really important. What are those big ticket items? And with the overall expectations, they're all pretty big, but some are bigger than others, and for various reasons. And so it's about, that's where I go back to making sure that it's about the learning as opposed to nickel and diming the grades. So it's just food for thought, and we're just opening the conversation here. But you won't find the percentages in the curriculum documents, and that's for a reason. And they haven't been there since the inception of these curriculum documents in whatever it was, 1998, 2000, I was on those curriculum teams, and we never ever put those percentages in there. The subject associations made recommendations about what they should be way back in the day, but they've never actually come out and printed them as exact percentages. So it's just food for thought and just something to think about. Let's move on to the next group, because we're just about at the end of our time. Did anyone else have anything to share?
I'll jump in and just say that I got hung up talking to myself about how to incorporate follow-up questions into what we do at KIHS, and Ben talked about it at the classroom level, but from a subject teacher's point of view, it's always troubled me that we don't have as many opportunities for conversation and follow-up questions as we might like. Our teachers might ask the follow-up question, but the student might not read it, so that's got me thinking.
That is an interesting point. Did someone else have something to share?
Just if I can add something, when I was in teachers college and right after, there was a lot of emphasis on the Bloom's taxonomy of learning, and that's how we created our questions. And there isn't much of an emphasis on that in Ontario, I find. I did my teachers college in Newfoundland, so I think that could be something to keep in mind while we create questions. And I find there's a lot of, me personally, when I create my courses, I depend a lot on questions that are given as examples in the curriculum documents, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, Bloom's taxonomy is, that's a good one too. And there's also one called Mosenthal's taxonomy that walks through different levels of questioning as well. So there's all kinds of different little things out there. But one of the things that I noticed really quickly was when he asked the question, what makes you say that, as opposed to why? And it was just a specific way that it was worded, and I thought back to my training in restorative practices where the questions are around what were you thinking as opposed to why did you do that? And because why sometimes indicates that there's one answer and that it's sometimes hard to answer and you might just get a, I don't know, whereas what makes you say that personalizes it and brings it back to the student. So I just thought, you know, the wording of our questions is so incredibly important, and that when we use the questions, we can use those to elicit the student voice, and we can also pick up if there's any misconceptions that we need to like slow it down or back it up or correct something if there are misconceptions out there or if they haven't gotten it yet. So I just have 3 or 4 more slides here, and I'm not going to read them all to you. I'm just going to go through them really quickly. And these last few slides are around balancing your assessment so that you ensure that you are using observations and conversations. And this slide just speaks to why observations and conversations are so very important and how you can use them. And then products or performance tasks and the purpose that they serve. So if you are creating a balance, that you want to ensure that you're using some things, and these are just bare minimum lists and just some ideas of things that you can do to try and balance your assessment. But generally what we notice when we ask teachers to sort of self-assess where they're at in their assessment, a lot of kindergarten grade 1 teachers will say, I use a lot of observations and maybe a few more conversations, and then by the time we get to grade 12, it's a lot more about the product than it is about the observation or conversation. So just making sure that you know that all 3 of those are important, and that ensuring assessment is balanced, provides greater equity of opportunity and outcome, greater validity and reliability in your professional judgment of student achievement, because you've incorporated all 3 areas, which speak to different learning styles, different strengths, different needs. And then my last slide here is about moving away from a culture of teaching and moving more towards a culture of learning. So slowing down and documenting what we see in here without actually evaluating. So we're using that assessment for learning to move the learning forward. We're studying the learning. What's the evidence of thinking and learning? We're analyzing, studying, questioning students, talking with our colleagues in order to document and more deeply understand the learning that's happening and different purposes. Thinking about the interrelationships between assessment for and as and of learning and how they work together and how they work separately. And that when we're giving next steps, that instead of it just being another activity, that we are purposely planning so that the next step leads to growth in learning so that the student is always moving forward. And then if you do go into the document, I've added in just a little document that comes from that Ron Richard, who was talking about changing the questions. And this just gives you sort of an idea of how to refocus your questions from being sort of about teaching to being more about understanding. So it's just an example that's there for you. This one is, I think, about the rainforest. It might be like a science lesson. So there's a couple sheets there that you can go through and have a look at. But that's what I have for you tonight. And Jessica, do you want to say anything before we close?
Okay, first of all, just thank you, Tracy. I was just mentioning to Ben that I really appreciated the last portion of the VC, and my apologies to everyone that I was late for the VC. I was just meeting with Chief and Counsel, so I apologize for that. But what came to mind here at the very end was I was explaining to Ben that, in my opinion, when our students have the opportunity to do land-based experiential learning, whatever the curriculum delivery is, I believe that's where you would see some very clear rollouts of getting to the how and getting to some deeper meaning and learning for our students. So I'm just encouraged by this VC topic, and feel it's a good reminder for all of us to not be so focused on the formula sometimes that we get in our mind of what assessment equals, but be looking and challenging and reflecting as to what our student needs are to ultimately provide successful achievement for all students. So thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jessica. I also wanted to say how much I've enjoyed these sessions. I'm not sure that you've enjoyed listening to me go on and on and on, but assessment is definitely one of my areas of extreme passion, and I've worked on a number of different teams with assessment. So if there's anything that you would like to know or like to explore deeper, I probably have a resource I could share with you. And I just wanted to let you know that I have been in contact with your mentors, and I'm encouraging them to get in touch with you as often as possible. So if there's anyone who is still having difficulty reaching their mentor, could you please let me know right away? And Jessica and I will be on the plan to get you hooked up with your mentor here so that you can have a little face-to-face time rather than over technology.
So for my mentor, would they be like visiting the classroom? It's still going. Can I turn it off?
Before people sign off, I'd really like a moment with Adrian and Stefan at the end of the session. If those two principals don't mind holding on for a couple minutes, that would be awesome.